In these uncertain times, the most important thing is for us to pull together and help each other out. We here at We're in Hell don't just see you as valuable viewers, but valuable members of our family. As such, it's important to us that we continue to provide you with irreverent leftist video essays now more than ever. Our team members are working around the clock in crowded quarters with minimal ventilation in order to ensure that we deliver exceptional content to you and record earnings to our shareholders. Because remember, we're in hell together.
Hey everyone, for this video I'm going to be talking about essential jobs. And this is going to be a fun video because of all the topics I've covered on this channel, this is for sure the one that I am the most qualified to talk about. I've worked every bad job, which you can probably tell since I have that thing where I look like the physical manifestation of minimum wage. I look like I was evolutionarily designed to say, would you like to add a drink to that and make it a combo? The crappy job that I had for the longest time was working at a Canadian fast food chain called Pita Pit, which I worked at all throughout university. For those of you who don't know Pita Pit, you're gonna be shocked to learn that it's not a particularly authentic Middle Eastern restaurant. Pita Pit is the type of place that sells souvlaki shawarmas with honey mustard and Southwest seasonings. This isn't helped by the fact that they're in the Subway genre of fast food places, so customers just pick from all the toppings and hubristically design their own monstrosities. Pita Pits are also notoriously terribly run. My boss was a very nice lady who had absolutely no idea what she was doing. One time, another employee stole like $200 from the register. When my boss found out about it, she was furious. She was like, yeah, you know, 15, 20 bucks goes missing, that's fine. But 200 is too much. It's a very strange experience to have your boss tell you that you're allowed to steal, but only a little bit. The literally shittiest job I ever had was working at the Canadian National Exhibition, also known as the X, which is basically like a big fair that happens every summer in Toronto. I was 16 years old and cleaning public bathrooms. The funniest bullshit boss thing I've ever seen happened on my first day there. Me and all the other teenage janitors were sent into like a big room, and the general manager got on stage and gave us a big speech. At the beginning of our day, we'd all been given a package with a bunch of forms and information and a notebook. The general manager says, listen, you know, this is a thankless job that you have, but it's important. Yes, like most times if someone's talking to you, it's because something's gone wrong. You're not going to get a lot of thanks, but it is really important what you're doing. But here's the silver lining. If you see anything going on, anything messed up happens, you got this notebook. You can write down anything you want in that notebook. And if someone sees you and says, hey, what are you writing? Give me that notebook. You say, no, I don't have to, because the general manager told me not to. I want to be clear here that it's not like we would hand in that notebook if we needed to report something or anything. He was just telling us that we were allowed to have a diary. The worst job I ever had, though, was working as a server at a fancy members-only yacht club. Like, it was a really classy place. I used to have really long hair. I had to cut it all off to work there, which was probably a good thing, right? Like, when you're a dude with a ponytail, it can only go one of two ways. It's either dragon shirts or maybe he paints. I remember during my first week, I messed something up and this guy's steak wound up taking longer than it should have. So, I brought it to him, I apologized, and then he gave me a lecture on how if I don't change my ways, I'll be a failure for the rest of my life. And the thing that was so messed up was he wasn't mad at me. In his mind, he was doing me a favor. This dude walked away from that like, man, if that kid works hard, follows my advice, and gets a little bit lucky, maybe he too could inherit his parents' company. And I should give some context on this place. There are 2 yacht clubs in Toronto. One was founded by the Jews and Catholics that weren't allowed to join the place that I worked at. So it was a classy joint, right? There wasn't a lot of riffraff. And this is true. My grandparents weren't allowed to join this place because they were Jews. And so the whole time I was working there, I had this fantasy in my head where, at some point one of the people there would be like, oh, do you sail? And I would go, no, but my grandparents did. And they'd go, oh, were they members? And I would go, no, they were Jews. Of course, that never happened because they don't talk to the help. I remember there's this one member, this woman was the absolute worst. This woman owned the pyramid scheme that was at that time ruining my friend's life. Do you know what I mean when your friend posts on Facebook or something being like, I've got a great opportunity for anyone who's trying to make loads of money working from home as your own boss. And you're just like, oh, Rachel's about to lose a lot of money. This is the woman who was taking Rachel's money. And the thing is, she wasn't even that bad. The problem was her daughter. Her daughter was the absolute worst. So, she was this little girl. She was allowed to order anything she wanted off of her parents' account. The one rule is she was only allowed 1 glass of pop. After that, she had to, switch to milk or water or something. And so I was serving her, and at one point she asked for a glass of pop, and then she asked for a refill. And, I'm not great at confrontations, but as a 12-year-old girl, I thought I could handle it. So I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not allowed a second glass of pop. And she just snaps. She's like, why not? It's like, it's bad for you. It's bad for your teeth. It's going to turn your teeth yellow. And then she said the coldest shit I've ever heard. She just goes, my teeth are brighter than your future. And I didn't know what to say there, right? I wanted to have a cool comeback, but I kind of just said the first thing that came to mind, but it didn't come out right. I was just like, oh yeah, well, my grandparents were Jews. So why am I bringing all this up? Well, I think that over the past 10 years or so, there's been this trend towards lionizing hard, shitty, dangerous work. A trend which has been kicked into high gear recently as countries move towards reopening the economy and lazy, good-for-nothings like public school teachers are shamed for not wanting to put themselves and their students into harm's way in order to take one for the team. And by team, I do mean the stock market.
We have all the people, the store clerks at the peak of the pandemic, checking out hundreds and hundreds of people. We have the incredible frontline healthcare workers, PSWs, doctors, nurses, through the peak of the pandemic, dealing with COVID patients. We have truck drivers, we have manufacturers that are in production lines. And now it's time the teachers step up. Everyone else is sacrificed.
Those who oppose reopening or don't want to be going into a dangerous workplace will get attacked by people who will invoke this heroic image of essential workers, saying grocery store workers have been working through all this and now it's public school teachers' turn to put themselves in danger too, which is very strange because the people saying this do not give a shit about the safety of grocery store workers. In order to understand this, I think we first have to look at the idea of the Protestant work ethic. And I know what you're thinking. Sam, Why are you making this a complicated research essay? Just talk about the shitty jobs that you've worked in a funny way and turn this out quickly. Thought Slime's done this a bunch. And sure, would that be an easier video to make? Yes. Would my channel do better if I uploaded videos super regularly? Absolutely. But would my subscribers prefer that to an in-depth research essay? Of course they would. But there's something you have to understand here. This channel is called We're in Hell, and we aren't in hell unless I am. The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber is a seminal piece of sociological writing. Basically, Protestants believe that if you exhibit garbage, useless traits like asceticism, hard work, and frugality, that's a sign that you're gonna go to heaven. And so, Weber argues, Protestants have a greater work ethic because of the symbolic meaning that their religion places on these mundane interactions. This went on to form the basis for the sociological theory known as functionalism. The theory is actually called symbolic interactionism. That was just a joke for the sociology heads in the crowd. What am I doing with my life? Now, longtime viewers of the channel might know that we here at We're in Hell have a bit of a standing beef going with the bourgeoisie. Yo, I will crush any small business owner in a debate. But while some of us might definitely take issue with the idea that capitalists work for their money, if you go back to very early capitalism in Europe, the newly emerging bourgeoisie class sure as shit did more to work for their wealth than the old aristocrats did. And so, while the shift towards capitalism is happening in Europe in the 16th century, we started to see an expansion of the types of people who could become rich. But one issue for these early hustlers was that the Catholic Church was not down, since they had very negative views of the pursuit of wealth. Which, to be fair, there is some truth to that, but also if you're saying that to justify a feudal society where you just so happen to wield an insane amount of power, being the guy who lives in a huge building made out of gold and priceless art telling people they should care less about money isn't a great look. Fortunately for these hungry entrepreneurs, around the same time a new sect of Christianity was hitting the scene, founded by 16th century hustle culture influencer Martin Luther. Unlike Catholicism, Protestantism provided a theological justification for capitalistic wealth accumulation by making work the central way for you to demonstrate your virtue. In Protestantism, you don't want to work really hard so that you can make a ton of money like a greedy sack of shit. Instead, you want to make a ton of money because that's evidence that you work really hard, which in turn is evidence that you're gonna go to heaven. Welcome to the Church of the Grind, baby. As Jesus said to those stones, let's get this bread. This all went on to have a massive impact on early American culture. Through the Protestant work ethic, hard work isn't just something that's like good to do for yourself, but instead is a virtuous calling for God and a good deed to do for your community. Another key thing here was the relatively looser class system in America. Something Weber noted is that the Protestant work ethic relies on there being social mobility, since if your position in life can't be changed, then it's not your responsibility, and there's no point in you working harder to improve it. But as anyone would know if they've read a David Brooks article about how anyone born after 1993 can't work hard, all they know is McDonald's, charge they phone, twerk, be bisexual, eat hot chip, and lie, the Protestant work ethic did not stick around. But rather than society going to hell in the mid-90s, I would argue that this change started a bit further back in the Industrial Revolution. While, sure, industrialization led to all sorts of amazing technologies and efficiencies, it also kind of crushed people's ability to take artisanal pride in their work. You know, there's nothing very fulfilling about being a single cog on an assembly line full of other cogs, right? And this whole thing kind of left people feeling, I don't know, like some kind of alien or something. And importantly, before industrialization, how hard you worked would have a direct impact on the quality of the good that you would put out, and therefore a correlation to getting more of that cash money. Whereas if you're just working on an assembly line, it's not like your community is gonna find out that you're working twice as hard as the people on either side of you. And so, as work became less and less fulfilling, a shift was made, not to make work better, but rather to have people work fewer hours and to not view work as something where you would get fulfillment in and of itself, but rather to view it as a means to an end of getting the money you need so that you can enjoy the remaining 16 hours of your day. And one of the big effects of this was the rise of conspicuous consumption. Now, if people can no longer tell how hard you work based on the product of your labor, instead you have to signal how hard you work by buying flashy shit. And then we run into another problem, which is the rise of inequality. As we talked about earlier, the Protestant work ethic does not work unless there's social mobility. But over the course of the 19th and 20th century, inequality in America skyrocketed. So now, not only does your shitty job alienate the ever-loving fuck out of you, but it's pretty obvious that it's not gonna get you rich either. And here's where things kind of get interesting. Thank fucking God. Because if you're stuck in the underclass, buying expensive stuff to show off your work ethic doesn't really scan, does it? Like, we all know that this blue-collar schlub isn't rich, so buying a bunch of shit that rich people buy just comes off as showing off that he's bad with money. So what do? I mean, community has long since been destroyed, and so no one has an intrinsic sense of identity, and so instead, you buy your identity. Through the act of consumption, identity has become a project, which is completed through the acquisition of signifiers. And throughout the 21st century, I think that the most interesting identity to be commodified is that of working class.
Okay, odds are if you're one of the people in America with a pickup truck, it ain't a luxury, it's a way of life. And chances are you're not making your money pushing a pencil or hand modeling. You're actually working for every dollar and need your truck.
This is, interestingly, a pretty recent phenomenon. Throughout the 20th century, working class people appeared in ads as props, never as aspirational subjects. Now, this all relates to a concept by Michael Schudson called capitalist realism. And no, I'm not talking about the Mark Fisher book. I am the only leftist on YouTube who has not read that. I'm just quirky like that. I'm not like the other video essayists. Schudson's concept came from him looking at a different art movement called socialist realism. And when I say that, art movement might be a little bit generous, since socialist realism is literally just communist propaganda. Which, I mean, hey, like, I have some self-awareness here, I can't hate, but socialist realism specifically refers to government-funded utopian art meant to depict the world not as it was, but as the socialist governments wished it to be. Schudson argued that the capitalist equivalent to socialist realism, capitalist realism, would just be advertisements. You know, idealized fantasies depicting the world as capitalists would like it to be. The question then is, and I'm so sorry that this is such a long-winded video just to get to this point, but what does it say when capitalist realism is turned inward to depict dangerous and alienating labor? All those like bullshit ads where corporations say that we're all in this together and it's time for workers to make the ultimate sacrifice to keep the economy going. It all reminds me of a man named Mike Rowe.
What if it's really safety third, right? No, I mean, really, what I mean to say is, I value my safety on these crazy jobs as much as the people that I'm working with, but the ones who really get it done, they're not out there talking about safety first. They know that other things come first. The business of doing the work comes first, the business of getting it done.
Mike Rowe is a former opera singer turned TV host and a mascot for blue-collar hard work. In the shows he hosts, like Dirty Jobs and Deadliest Catch, Rowe shows the joy of working a crappy, dangerous job for an honest day's pay. Through this, he's also become a spokesperson for tough guy, masculine-coded products like dope-ass trucks for real men who work for a living.
This thing is 5,000 pounds of, hey, can I give you a hand with that? And oh yeah, guess what?
As well as working for the vampiric ghouls, the Koch brothers, Koch brother, David Koch, was tragically slain last year with a cancerous stake to the prostate, and he's up there jamming with Hendrix. The funny thing about Rowe's shows like Dirty Jobs is, as much as they claim to valorize hard work, they very rarely center the actual workers. Instead, Rowe is walked through a day of work by the owner. Dirty Jobs would be a very different show if it was actually just a day in the life of the worker. That would literally just be undercover journalism. As Gabriel Winant writes,
while they deal in a rhetoric of working-class heroism, they systematically push the human beings whose labor they nominally valorize to the margins. They both awaken the set of largely nostalgic desires of work before neoliberalism, and they reenact in each episode the dynamics of class power by which work has been destabilized and workers made invisible. The company's narrow profit margin and resulting harsh labor conditions appear as an adventure rather than the stuff of muckraking. In other words, the show's protagonist and subject is capital. The workers are props.
Another example of this is this ad made by another one of Rowe's employers, Walmart.
This July 4th, let's think about what it means to be independent, to be free. That's what built manufacturing in America, and it's what will rebuild it. You can see it happening in small towns where factories are pumping life back into communities, and we are once again calling the shots. So, enjoy the holiday, and then let's go to work.
Remember that ad was made by the company that has done more to destabilize labor in America than probably any other organization. Well, arguably except for leftist infighting on Twitter. Why is no one talking about left-on-left violence? During the 19th century, an art movement emerged called social realism. And look, I realize this is getting pretty confusing with all the different types of realisms. I have nowhere near enough control over the naming conventions of art movements, but let me tell you, when the revolution comes, there are going to be a lot of changes. Probably the most famous piece of social realism, again, different from socialist realism, is American Gothic. And while we probably don't think about it this way when we see that image now, social realism was actually a very radical art movement meant to capture the lived experiences of the downtrodden. The subjects of beautiful, realistic paintings on massive canvases were supposed to be wealthy aristocrats and epic scenes, not the working poor. This was a radical shift meant to draw attention to poverty and the sources that caused it. But just as the meaning of American Gothic has shifted from a critique of provincialism to a celebration of American hard work, Winant argues that shows like Dirty Jobs and ad campaigns all about gritty hard work have appropriated the aesthetics of social realism into capitalist realism.
It is a paean to creative destruction and capital mobility, costumed in overalls and spoken through a ventriloquized working class. Here, the fetishism of commodities, the manner in which market exchange hides the labor congealed in the product, eats its own tail. In this new mode of salesmanship, the very appeal of the product, whether jeans, a car, or a television show, rests explicitly on the labor that it is advertised to contain, though this labor becomes distorted and mythologized in the process of going on display.
It's funny to think about what people must think crappy jobs are like if they're just basing it off of the media and have never worked at one. I notice this all the time with those awful Vice videos about chefs' nights out, where they paint these awesome, epic pictures of how dope it is to be a fucking line cook. almost every job I've ever had has been in the restaurant industry. Like, I've been in the shit as a line cook before. Before March, I was working 40-hour weeks, giving myself carpal tunnel and screaming at people who took too long to peel an avocado. God, I miss it. On the Vox-owned website Eater, of all places, there's a really interesting article about the amazing Netflix show Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, where they point out how the amazing artisans the host Samin Nosrat talks to depict a fantasy of unalienated labor. While Eater argues that this is radical and subversive, I disagree. I think that for most people, this fantasy of unalienated labor will remain just that, a fantasy. And I don't want this video to just come off as work bad, because work not bad, fulfilling work good. But if you do take away nothing else from this, please just don't die for your shitty job. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope all of you watching this are having a happy and healthy Labor Day and aren't being screwed over by your job. I know September 7th isn't the real Labor Day. Real Labor Day is May 1st, but you know, we can pretend. And if anyone is watching this on a day other than Labor Day, you're literally committing a crime right now, and I hope that you rot in prison. Anyway, this video was possible thanks to my wonderful patrons, especially Communist Android, Evan, Olivia Stoltenberg, ERIKA Shalinsky, Alfonso, Cody Stevens, Christina Davies, Sip, QTA10, Mosh Zombie, Christopher Tubbs, Ron Doofdad, Jack Crawford, Gay Vocalizations, Jacob Friedman, Graydon Sims, G. Purr, Casey Kudniak, Judd from Splatoon, Vegito, Maurice Robert, Jubion, Rachel Ann, Nick Corpius, Ruby, Tony Wise, B. Quinn, Jamie, oh boy, Baron Gulgrita af Christel Krona, nailed it. Lonely Party, Ramsey Barghouti, Kenzie G, Slithers, Alex Arcudi, Eggsbox, Kennedy, Donovan Ekstrom, Gamp, Lo Aline, Niels Adelgard, Christina Bolhewis, Muppet Mistake, Morgan Grobin, Megan Glynn, Relaxo, Comrade Fox, Clement Chutskoff, Toby Robbins, Caleb P. Fales, Tim Hawksummer, Kishal T, William Rowe, Nemo, Good Poon Hates Cops, that's solid poon then, Jesus, Alec J. Radecki, Arna's Calling, Kells, Jesse Nyland, Mr. Awesome B. Cool, Comrade Psy, Beth Solman, John Price, and Isso Kuhn. Thanks so much for watching, and bye-bye.